My boss planned her promotion in my office, using my chair, my computer, and my work. For a long time, I thought it was just another late night. Another, can you stay a bit longer, Ethan? Moment. I didn't realize I was literally preparing the documents that would push me sideways and lift her up. Looking back, the first red flag wasn't even the contract. It was how comfortable she'd become with treating my career like something she already owned. I've worked at the same mid-sized company for 7 years. Construction management, nothing glamorous. Budgets, schedules, change orders, that kind of thing. I'm not the loud guy in the room. I'm the one who knows where every file is, who actually reads the footnotes, who remembers what we agreed in a meeting 6 months ago when everyone else just remembers the muffins. That's basically why Marissa liked me. She came in 3 years after I started. New operations manager, sharp blazer, sharp eyeliner, sharper smile. On her first week, she said, "Ethan, I've heard you're the guy who actually keeps this place stitched together." It sounded like a compliment, and I treated it like one. It took me about a year to realize stitched together meant you do the invisible work so I can stand in front of slides and look impressive. When she joined, my title was project coordinator. On paper, that sounds junior, but in reality, I was the one chasing signatures, talking to inspectors, revising timelines, catching mistakes in spreadsheets that could cost 6 figures if nobody noticed. Marissa would breeze into my cube with her coffee and say things like, "I need that update from you before my 3 p.m. with leadership," as if it had always been her update. She was good at the theater. She'd walk out of those meetings saying, "We're in a good place. They really liked how I framed the delays." And my name rarely came up unless something had gone wrong. If something went right, it was my team. You know how people joke about being work married? That's what people called us. Marissa and Ethan, the power duo. As if that was something I'd agreed to. The running gag was that I was the quiet husband who did all the chores, and she was the one who got the compliments on the clean house. I laughed along at first. You do that to survive. Then the restructuring rumors started. It began as a throwaway comment from HR during a lunch and learn. We're evaluating how our teams are structured to support growth. Everyone rolled their eyes. In corporate, evaluating structure is like hearing distant thunder. You don't know if it's going to be a storm or just noise. Over the next few weeks, that thunder got louder. More meetings behind closed doors. Directors walking around with folders they wouldn't put down. A couple of managers suddenly very interested in metrics they'd ignored for months. Marissa came back from one of those hush-hush meetings with a look I'd never seen on her before. Not nervous, hungry. She leaned on the wall of my cube and said too casually, "If there is a new operations director role opening up, we are in a very strong position, Ethan. The numbers on our projects look great." We. I heard it, but I didn't push on it. I just nodded and pulled up the latest dashboard. She started asking for more. Not in a, "could you help me out" way, in a, "I need you to do this so I can go be visible" way. Slide decks, breakdowns of savings I'd negotiated, risk assessments I'd written. She'd skim, tweak a heading, and present them as her insights. One evening around 7:30, the office was mostly empty. The sun had already dropped behind the buildings, and the cleaning crew was rattling bins down the hallway. I was finalizing a cost variance report when she appeared in my doorway with 2 takeout boxes. "Dinner," she said like it was a favor. "If you're going to save my life with this report, the least I can do is feed you." I took the box, because free food is free food, and watched her sit in my guest chair like it belonged to her. "What's this for?" I asked, nodding at the stack of documents in her hands. "Just aligning some things," she said. "They're looking at who actually drives operational efficiency. You know how messy the numbers are when you don't tell the right story." She spread the pages out on my desk. Project summaries, margin improvements, on-time deliveries. All of them were mine. My spreadsheets, my color coding, my notes in the margins. Only the names at the top of each summary said, "Prepared by Marissa Cole." I felt something cold settle under my ribs, but I swallowed it. Looks good, I said, because that's what you say when your boss is already halfway up a ladder and using your shoulders as the bottom rung. She smiled, slow and satisfied. It does, doesn't it? This is what leadership needs to see. Clean narrative. Clean narrative. That phrase stuck with me. The next week, she started redirecting people to me more openly, but always in a way that made her look like the hero. Ethan can get you that, she'd tell finance. He's my right hand. Just loop Ethan in, she'd say to procurement. I've trained him on how we like to handle these. We trained him. I'd been doing that work before she even joined the company. Still, I kept my head down. My parents raised me on the idea that if you just keep being solid and reliable, someone will notice. Promotions, they said, go to people who do the work, not the ones who talk. They were wrong, but it took me a while to admit that. One afternoon, I ran into our HR business partner, Nina, in the hallway. She's one of those people who always knows more than she's allowed to say. How's ops life? She asked, walking beside me toward the kitchen. Busy, I answered. We've got a lot of plates spinning. She gave me a look. Yeah, I've seen the reports. Something in her tone made me pause. Everything okay? Depends who you ask, she said lightly, then added, By the way, if you ever want to talk about career pathing, my door's open. Career pathing. Another phrase that suddenly sounded loaded. That night, back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and went through the shared drive. I wasn't looking for anything specific, at least that's what I told myself. I just wanted to see how our work was being packaged. Folder after folder, I saw the same pattern. My raw files, my analysis, exported into PDFs with her name on the front page. Sometimes I was listed in 6-point font on the last slide as data support. Sometimes not at all. I closed the laptop harder than I meant to. Up until then, I'd been telling myself a story. I was paying my dues, waiting my turn. She was the face, I was the engine, and eventually someone would trace the power back to the source. Sitting there in the dark, the glow from the screen fading, I finally let a different thought in. What if she wasn't just standing in front of my work? What if she was building a case that I didn't exist? The next morning, Marissa stopped by my cube with a coffee I hadn't asked for. Big few weeks ahead, she said cheerfully. We're going to come out of this restructure on top, trust me. I looked at the coffee, then at her, and for the first time in 7 years at that company, I didn't automatically trust my boss. She started tightening the screws without ever raising her voice. That was her talent, making pressure feel like professional expectations. But underneath it, something sour was growing, and even I, with all my patience, could feel it spreading through the walls. The shift began small. She asked me to forward her all my weekly reports, in raw format, not the cleaned-up versions I usually sent leadership. Then she wanted access to my project folders, just in case they asked questions I can't predict. I told myself it was temporary, part of the restructure chaos. But then she started locking those same files behind permissions so I couldn't see what she did with them. The first real hit came when I passed by the copy room and saw her standing by the printer with a stack of documents, thick, bound, and stamped confidential on the cover. I might not have noticed anything if she hadn't said too sharply, "You shouldn't be in here right now, Ethan." That tone, like I had stepped into her territory, rubbed me wrong. Later that day, she left one of those confidential packets on my desk by accident, and inside, under Achievements and Key Contributions, I read through 2 full pages of my projects, written under her name, word for word. Even the phrasing I used, the kind I'd never heard her say out loud, was printed in black and white, as if she'd typed it herself. When she rushed in to grab the packet, her smile was brittle. "Oh, that wasn't supposed to be there. Just early drafts. Nothing final." I handed it to her, and for the first time, I didn't pretend everything was fine. "Why are my deliverables listed under you?" She blinked once, twice. "Don't be dramatic. Leadership doesn't need every little detail. It's about presenting a unified front." A unified front where I didn't exist. I went home that night with a knot in my stomach that felt like a warning. I didn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying years of moments I'd brushed off. Her jokes about being the brains of the operation, the time she introduced me as my assistant, the way she took praise like oxygen and handed out credit like rations. I'd let it happen. That part hurt worse than the rest. The next morning, before she arrived, I combed through the shared drive again, and that's when I saw it. A folder she'd created the night before, labeled Operational Leadership Package Draft. Inside were versions of documents I'd never touched, but they were built off my files, my timeline structures, my calculations, my formats, but the name on every document? Prepared by Marissa Cole, candidate for Director of Operations. My chest tightened. It felt personal now, not just corporate. She wasn't just presenting my work as hers. She was arranging the entire narrative so that I looked like an assistant who supported her brilliance. Then a file caught my eye. Resource Transfer Proposal. Final pending signature. I opened it. My job responsibilities were listed, but reassigned. To her. The logic was twisted into something that almost sounded reasonable if you didn't know the truth. Given Marissa's demonstrated ownership of operational processes, to formalize current functional realities, recommended that Ethan transition into a support capacity under her leadership. Support capacity. Under her. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen, feeling heat crawl up my neck. She wasn't just stealing credit. She was laying the groundwork to bury my career under hers. I closed the file and locked my computer, hands shaking with something I hadn't felt at this job before. Anger that didn't fade with deep breaths. Marissa arrived 10 minutes later in a bright mood. She'd placed her bag on her desk and said, "Big day today. Leadership wants a pre-read this afternoon. I'll need your notes before lunch." "I'm not giving you anything until we talk," I said. She froze. Her smile didn't move, but something behind it did. "Talk about what?" she asked. "You're putting my work in your promotion package." She exhaled like I'd inconvenienced her. "Ethan, I'm shaping a narrative that benefits the whole team. If I move up, you move up. That's how this works." "No. If you move up using my work, I disappear. That's how this works." Her eyes hardened. "Be careful how you phrase things. We're in a sensitive period. Leadership does not like instability." I wanted to laugh in her face. Instability? She was rewriting my job description behind my back, and she wanted me to stay quiet so the paperwork would go down smooth. Around lunch, the tension got heavier. People were whispering. HR looked busy. Directors were pacing in and out of rooms with stern faces, and Marissa was buzzing around like a bee that knew exactly where the hive was. Then, right at 2:17 p.m., she sent me a message through chat. "Come to your office. Bring your badge. We need to finalize the signature package." My badge? Why would I need my badge? I walked toward my office, hearing my heartbeat in my ears, and opened the door to see leadership folders on my desk, neatly arranged. And standing right beside them, Marissa. She smiled. "Let's get this done cleanly, Ethan. It's better for both of us." But that was only the surface, because what she didn't know, not yet, was that someone else had already told me something she never wanted me to hear. And that one sentence changed everything. She didn't even try to hide the satisfaction on her face. My office had been rearranged like a stage. Papers fanned out, signature tabs stuck on the edges, even a pen placed perfectly parallel to the folder, as if she'd rehearsed this scene in her head a dozen times. And maybe she had. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. She didn't flinch. "Let's walk through the package," she said, tapping the folder. "Leadership wants everything signed before the afternoon briefing." I didn't sit. "Why do you need my badge?" She gave a light laugh. "Oh, that? The transfer requires digital acknowledgement. It'll auto-log your consent through the access panel." Then, as if explaining to a child, "Standard practice." It wasn't. Not for a lateral transfer, not for a role restructure, and definitely not for a demotion hidden under the word transition. She opened the first document and pushed it across the desk. Go ahead and sign here. Just formalities. Formalities. I looked at her, and for the first time since this entire mess began, I felt nothing. Not confusion, not anger, not fear. Just clarity. Cold, precise clarity. Because 2 hours earlier, while I was pretending to update a dashboard, our HR business partner Nina had stopped by my desk and asked quietly, "Did you approve the transfer language she submitted? The part where you give up operational authority?" I told her I'd never seen any version of it. Nina's eyes hadn't widened, which was somehow worse. She only nodded once and said, "Come see me when you're ready." Then she walked away like she'd just dropped a match in a dry forest. Now Marissa was sitting in my chair, pen in hand, waiting for me to tie the noose around my own neck. I pulled out the chair and sat down slowly. She smiled like she'd won. Good. Let's make this smooth. Leadership appreciates employees who don't create friction. That word again. Friction. She used it the way surgeons use anesthesia. I opened the first folder. Pages and pages of my work, my numbers, my structures, all recast in her voice. At the bottom of each, her signature line. Above the signatures, rewritten job roles that made me sound like her personal shadow. She watched me read, confident enough to cross her legs and sip her iced coffee. "You know," she said softly, "once this goes through, the department will finally have a coherent hierarchy. I'll be the face. You'll handle the execution. It actually plays to your strengths." I met her eyes. "I thought my strength was making you look competent." Her smile twitched. Barely, but I saw it. I flipped to the last page. The digital badge authorization. The one she planned to scan the second I looked away. Then I did something she didn't expect. I reached into my folder, pulled out a second document packet, and placed it on the desk, face down. "What's that?" she asked. "The real contract," I said quietly. The one HR sent me when they realized something didn't add up. Her breath caught, just a fraction, and the mask cracked at the edges. "I don't know what you mean," she said. Of course she did. I flipped it over. The clean, unaltered version, no transfer, no demotion, no reassignment, just a simple restructuring notice with role expansions. For me, not her. Her face drained. "Where did you get that?" I asked HR for the original, and they sent it, along with the metadata log showing who modified the other versions. A long, thick silence filled the room. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" she asked tightly. "Nothing," I said. "I'm not accusing you. I'm about to show leadership the truth. Big difference." She stood so fast her chair hit the wall. "You don't understand what you're doing," she snapped. "You're blowing up your career. Mine, too." "That's the thing," I said, still sitting, still calm. "Only one career in this room is in danger, and it isn't mine." Her eyes darted to the door. She was calculating. I could almost hear the gears grinding behind her forehead. Then she reached for the packet in front of me. I put my hand on it first. "No," I said. Her voice dropped to a hiss. "Ethan, don't be stupid." "I'm not," I replied. "But you were. You should have checked who has access to the revision history." She opened her mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to beg, but I cut her off. "And you definitely shouldn't have tried to submit forged documentation to the executive board." That landed hard. She reached for her phone, maybe to call someone, maybe to delete files, maybe to run. I didn't give her the chance. I opened the office door, wide, revealing two people standing in the hallway, Nina from HR and Mark, the operations director. Marissa froze mid-breath. Nina stepped in first, her tone neutral but firm. "We'll take it from here." Mark's voice followed, colder. "Marissa, we need to speak with you immediately." She tried to smile, tried to spin it, tried to find footing. "Wait, this is a misunderstanding. Ethan must have—" "Stop." Mark didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "We saw the documents, all of them." The color drained from her face. I stepped back, letting them in, letting the walls close around her. She opened her mouth again, grasping for a lifeline that wasn't there. I was just trying to consolidate, to build a stronger structure, but the air had shifted. Everyone in that room felt it. Her story was over. Still, I didn't look away. Not once. Not when her arguments shrank. Not when her confidence cracked. Not when the truth finally cornered her. And then came the moment she broke. Shoulders collapsing, eyes wide, breathing shallow. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that means something has gone very, very wrong. And for the first time since the day she walked into my department, I wasn't the one being managed. They walked her out of my office without handcuffs, without shouting, without any of the theatrics you'd expect from a person who just detonated their own career. But the silence she left behind felt heavier than anything she could have said. Nina closed the door gently. Mark nodded once, the kind of nod that carries both closure and consequence, then followed her down the hallway. Their voices faded. Then even the footsteps did. For the first time in years, my office felt like it belonged to me. I sat down slowly, the adrenaline leaving my body in a long, steady exhale. The forged documents were still spread across my desk, tabs curling upward like they were trying to peel themselves off the page. I gathered them neatly, placed them in a folder, and set them aside. That chapter was over. But endings in corporate life rarely come with confetti. They come with emails. 10 minutes later, one arrived. Subject: organizational update. Immediate effect. I opened it. Short, clinical, precise. Marissa was being placed on administrative leave pending formal review. Access revoked. Responsibilities reassigned. And at the bottom, Ethan Carter will assume interim operational oversight. Interim. For now? I closed the email and leaned back in my chair. No rush of triumph hit me. No sharp buzz of victory. Just quiet. The kind of quiet you only recognize after years of trying to earn room to breathe. The next morning, the office moved like a place holding its breath. No one said her name, but everyone knew. People glanced at me in the hallway, not with pity, not with fear, but with a kind of relieved recognition, like they'd all been watching the same storm gather and finally saw where the lightning struck. By noon, HR called me upstairs. Nina slid a folder across the table. "We reviewed everything," she said. "Her edits, the access logs, the authorization attempts." "You were right," she paused. "And you handled it cleanly." I nodded once, not out of pride, out of certainty. I had stayed quiet for years, too quiet. But when the moment came, I didn't swing wildly. I didn't scream. I didn't try to burn the place down. I just told the truth in the only language corporations can't ignore. Documents that speak louder than people. Then she handed me another envelope. "This is the finalized restructure package," she said. "The correct one." I opened it. My name, new title, new responsibilities. A raise I'd never expected but had earned a long time ago. No fanfare, no speech. Just ink on paper restoring what someone else had tried to take. That evening I returned to my office, now officially mine, and stood for a moment in the doorway. The sun was dipping behind the buildings across the street, turning the glass walls gold. The chair was turned slightly, papers aligned just how I left them earlier. I closed the door behind me with a soft click. No celebration, no vindictive smile, just a quiet sense of alignment, like a picture finally hung straight after leaning for too many years. I sat, opened the first page of my new contract, and read it slowly. Every line, every clause, every detail. Not because I didn't trust it, but because it felt good to finally see things written the way they should be. Later, when I packed up to leave for the day, I walked past Marissa's empty office. The lights were off. The chair was pushed in. Her nameplate was gone. Just a blank door with nothing behind it. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I didn't feel sorry. What I felt was stillness. Clean, steady stillness. I stepped into the elevator, the doors sliding shut in front of me, and for the first time since I'd joined this company, I didn't feel like I was carrying someone else's weight. Some victories aren't loud, they don't roar, they don't warn, they just settle. And when they do, the only thing you hear is the quiet you've been missing for far too long.